way, and in a way that did not involve a lot of discussion, I think testifies to the weakness of the state. The fact is that Bouteflika, when he came into power, had a real opportunity, I think, to move forward with social development as a way of taking advantage of the security and stability that he was able to achieve by opening up the political process to a more degree, to improving the economic situation for the vast majority of people, to invest in universities so that people would have greater opportunity and taking advantage of that calm. Instead, he relied on the oil boom to take care of the people, and I think the vast majority of Algerians feel that the elite is corrupt in Algeria and are dismayed by this move.
Okay.
And I think it testifies to weakness, not strength.
Okay. Amal, your comments?
I think we have to understand what is the context of the political arena since 1992 in Algeria. Algeria is still a country under the state of emergency, which doesn't allow for pluralistic politics. And then now you have a new generation, a post-terrorism or terrorism generation, who grew up in the middle of violent environment, who don't trust politics anymore, and we are in some way losing the sense of citizenship, we are losing the sense of the vote, we are losing the sense of the elections, and that's the main danger with the third term, is that people don't trust politics anymore, institutions are totally disconnected from citizens. The fact that this has been voted by the parliament, whether by a public referendum, is so, it is the sign that people in Algeria are not interested and are not trusting politics anymore.
Okay. Jean, your comments before we go on to another issue.
Well, I understand very well Amal Boubekeur's comments, as well as Mourad Dina, who, of course, is in the opposition. I respect that. Once again, I would draw parallels with the U.S. government. Mourad spoke of a state of emergency in Algeria, making it almost impossible to have any manner of democracy. I wish to say that we in the United States didn't have a state of emergency. We had a state of war that was declared by George W. Bush. During this period of war, no one was allowed to criticize the government because they ran the risk of being considered as traitors. But we also have to come back to the basic principle of democracy. Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, he gave a warning that very few people have ever heeded. He said that, speaking of the United States, that whenever there was no separation of powers, there would become a tyranny. And we have just come out of a period of virtual tyranny.
Okay, Scott, you feel there's just no comparison there.
No comparison at all. In fact, the election of Barack Obama proves the point. The fact is that if the United States didn't have a constitution which allowed for peaceful alternation of power, then, Jean, what you're talking about would be unchangeable, whether the United States would have to resort to rising up in some sort of civil war. No. Instead, demographic groups, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, conservatives, Democrats, liberals, far-out right-wingers, everybody had a chance to participate, and the majority of people chose Barack Obama as their president. And what I've been amazed by since I've been watching this whole amazing process is the degree to which Americans have rallied around their new president-elect and said, look, we're going to give him a chance.
What you're saying, but it came so damn late. 8 years after the damage was done. And when George Bush was running for his second mandate, I was appalled at Democrats federating behind him because we were in a state of war and they were afraid to criticize the man. And like I said, he changed the laws of our country. John Ashcroft virtually sodomized our institutional system.
And where is John Ashcroft now? The fact is,
the rats leave the ship.
How many members?
Yeah, let's get back to Algeria. This really isn't an argument about U.S. democracy. Your point's taken that if you don't think the U.S. or Western democracies are in a position to criticize Algeria. But hold on.
It's a very good, pertinent parallel. We're good at bashing Algeria and other countries, and we need to look at our own government. And it's good to make a comparison.
We're the only Americans here. But go ahead, Amal, your comments.
No, the question actually in Algeria is, are we able to have political negotiation? Are we able to discuss the fact that Bouteflika will be re-elected? Do we have an opposition able to bring an alternative project? All the answers to these responses, please, are no. And this is not because we don't have people in Algeria don't have capabilities. They are not willing to join the political process. It's just because they are not allowing to. And it's very interesting that since Bouteflika has been in power, we have witnessed a kind of super presidential force above all political parties. And you can see it in civil society in Algeria. Everybody who is willing to have a home or to get married or to see an improvement in daily politics or policies that are framing the life of Algerian people is addressing his demands to the president.
Okay. Amal, we're unfortunately going to have to interrupt you because we need to take a break now for news and weather, but we will continue this discussion after that time. All of our panelists return, so do stay with us. Welcome back to the debate on France 24, where we have been discussing Algeria's move to amend the constitution in order to abolish presidential term limits. And joining me again to continue that debate here in the studio to my right, Amal Boubekeur, leader of the Islam and Europe program at the Center for European Policy Studies. Here to my left, Jean Lemort, a writer and specialist on Algeria. Via satellite from Geneva, Dr. Mourad Dina, co-founder and member of the Secretariat for the Rashad Movement, an opposition movement. And via satellite from Washington, Scott Carpenter, senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Near East Affairs. Thanks all so much for joining us tonight. Amel, let me begin with you. As you know, Bouteflika's critics say the vote itself to amend the Constitution, which passed by a margin of 500 to 21, just 8 abstentions, was not a secret ballot.
Yeah.
It was conducted by a show of hands. Yeah, and that Bouteflika already holds this vast majority in Parliament, and parliamentarians were recently granted a very considerable pay rise approved by Bouteflika. Does that say a lot to you in itself? I mean, why not just hold a public referendum on this very substantive issue?
Sure, it's not a problem for Bouteflika to win. I mean, if he's able to bring change, within the regime, because I think that's the real key issue for developing changes in Algeria. But the problem is the way it has been conducted. And during 6 months, they went totally silent on the issue of a third term. After a lot of debates, public debates in the press, on TV, and so on, they went totally silent. In my opinion, it was the sign that they didn't know exactly what to do for the presidential election. And then 1 month ago, or even a little bit more than that, they just raised the issue again, and without any public consultation, without any poll on the opinion of Algerian on this issue.
Yeah. Mourad Dina, do you think it would have been fair to hold a public referendum on this issue?
Well, I wish we were at that point. The problem is, as I said before, you cannot imagine any real political life under the state of emergency. And here the situation in Algeria is totally different, and I may disagree with Jean Lemort than from the United States, although I agree with him about George Bush and his policies. But you see, we are in a country which suffers from many sides. It suffers because it has a dictatorship, and let me remind you that Bouteflika is not really the real power and regime in Algeria. He is just the political facade of the military intelligence, and he has not been elected by the people initially, but first by the military intelligence, and there was a deal between them. And so, I mean, talking about referendum, yes, technically, I say that even this change with such a big change in the Algerian constitution is not constitutional, because Article 176, as I said before, forbids any such kind of change in the Algerian constitution only through referendum. You cannot touch the core of the Algerian regime, the relation between the presidency, creating a prime minister position, its relation to the parliament, and so on. So, but if I may say, just add one thing very important to me, and at least this has a relation to between Algeria and the international political scene, is that it's really something which is striking to see how the Western countries and the European Union would accept something which is morally degrading for democracy in Algeria. That means just accepting such a behavior from a military regime of this kind, and which in itself is regenerating in the long run the terrorism which they claim that they want to avoid.
To fight.
Right.
Sure, yeah. Let me ask Scott if you think Murad's assessment is fair.
I do think it's fair. I think that the fact is that Bouteflika has been a creature of the military. That since his time in power, there were some indications early on that he would seek to distance himself, or I know that was the line that many were taking. But it's clear that for democracy to move forward, political openness needs to begin to take place. It doesn't mean overnight change, but it means that there should be a strong indication that the intent of the leadership is to move